Well, South Africa's reputation among G8 countries has improved since earlier this year, but a study by the Reputation Institute also reveals that South Africans themselves don't rate their country very highly. The Institute are interviewing more than 700 people worldwide. Well, some response to this now. Dr. Petrus De Kock is with us from Brand SA. He is Head of Research. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. Brand SA has welcomed the improvement in these numbers, but the fact still remains we're at the bottom of the two halves, so to speak. There still must be concern, whether it be global or local.
I think maybe just some context. South Africa sits at 28 out of 50 nations studied in this report.
So in the bottom half, in other words.
Yeah. The United States, for example, is at 22. And just behind us is India at 30, Turkey at 34. So it gives us a sense of South Africa's position in terms of how it's viewed in reputation terms. And I think important in terms of the findings is that the South African people are very much admired as friendly and opening and welcome. Our role in global governance is respected. And I think that's very important in a period in our BRICS membership, our role in the United Nations, and also the positions the country takes sometimes in international relations.
Having said that, though, we score low as a country where there is a favorable climate to do business. We also rank low in technological advancement. And I think those are areas of concern.
No, for sure. I think that's where the job comes in terms of promoting the country. Reading from these kind of studies, what are the areas that we may, as Brand SA, need to communicate more on? Because we've got phenomenal innovation in the country. The square kilometre array in the next decade can do tremendous lot for the country in terms of positioning us as a leader at that edge. So I think it's also important in terms of reputation to say that reputation is built by the collective of the economic activity, business, government. It's not just government or not just business alone. That's a very important issue to underline here.
Having said that, though, why do we score so low as a country where there is a favorable climate to do business? What is the international community saying about South Africa?
I think it's maybe a case of awareness. I think reputation is very much built by awareness of certain things. We find in other studies, for example, that we conduct as Brand SA among international investors, that there's in the last year or two very much a significant increase in the association between South Africa as a business destination, and an improvement of that recognition. So, we look at a whole range of indicators ultimately to understand what's in the minds of either international investors or tourists or people looking at the country and trying to understand what do we offer the world ultimately.
Canada tops the list. What is it doing that we're not?
Canada is a very long established, a very settled kind of system, very stable in that regard. And I think South Africa as a developing country, we're very dynamic. People have questions in their minds maybe about us. We're 20 years into our democracy, so our society is developing. We've got sometimes issues whether it's in labor. We see, for example, in the reputation study, the impact also of the post-Marikana period, and also the improvement then later in the year. So it shows us that a normal day-to-day, just normal business in South Africa, we can actually build a solid reputation. And I think that's the message coming from this ultimately.
The international community has a very different view to how we think about the country ourselves. We don't have great perception of our reputation. Why is that?
Maybe something we pick up internationally in another study that we subscribe to called the Nation Brand Index. If you look at, for example, how the United Kingdom, how citizens of the country view the country, they tend to be also much more critical of the country than outsiders when they look at perception. And the same with South Africa. That South Africans, we are very tough, we're very hard on ourselves. I think our public discourse is very intense in cases. And I think when we look at criticism or perception in South Africa, we must very much as a society move to what are the facts? What are the facts that we need to look at and the things we need to fix?
Well, one of those facts is we're worried about operational inefficiencies, and that's true, isn't it?
Well, there are issues in our system. I don't think I think there's a lot of positives and negatives out there. I think the government itself acknowledges, that there are areas. If you just look at Minister Colin Shabane's most recent report, the Management Performance Assessment Tool, a very hard and cold look into the system to look at what are the issues that we need to improve on. And I think there is that transparency in South Africa to acknowledge the areas where we have where we need to improve. And I think that's important.
Thank you very much for joining us. Brand SA Head of Research, Dr. Petrus De Kock, with us here on Newsnight.